So now I will hand over to Markus Wimmen, Director of Partnership and Institutional Relationship, to give us a short overview of EU Tech Chamber introduction. Markus, the microphone is yours.
Yes, good morning, Ned. Thank you for the kind introduction. Dear guests, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear valued speakers, wonderful to have you all on board. Future of smart cities is a very relevant topic, I believe. And it's my pleasure as Director Partnership and Institutional Relations to hold a bit of an introduction about EU Tech and what we do and how we are organized. So as you see, I hope on your screen there's a slide which shows EU Tech Chamber Technology Obliges. If you don't see it, on the down right, there's an icon which looks like a screen with 3 legs. If you press that button, that will showcase my presentation. Any details which are relevant, I will also share them later in the chat, which you see on the top left under public chat, or in German language, öffentlicher Chat there. And you're also very welcome to share information about you, yourself, questions, which can be raised later through Net to the speakers. So yeah, as our slogan, EU Tech says, technology obliges. Our main goal as EU Tech is through technology to achieve the SDGs on time, if not faster. And I think there are 3 very important goals in between, where through technology, we want to make our advocates, our members, our partners, the whole stakeholders working on SDGs more competitive, more forceful, more powerful. When this is combined with the public sector, with the right programs, with the right connections, I think there is a good chance to make a business model more sustainable. And if that applies well, we are also able to create the new markets and also to upscale here, which means growth. As part of this, as EU Tech, we are here to serve all our stakeholders who are with us through what we call EU Tech Toolbox. So by selecting a number of topics which we put into our webinar as today, we mobilize for issues which we feel are relevant to achieve the SDGs. When doing this, we put that into our publication, white papers, position papers, therefore Vision for Europe magazine. We discuss it in the meetings, both externally but also in our internal networking meetings, and then try to make interests. So out of this, to create some valuable partnership and hopefully promising commercial agreements, if that is feasible at all. At the same time, there are then the physical meetings possible once, of course, with COVID end. We all hope that it will come soon. If it's a summit, if it's a delegation trips, as long as it does not apply, we are carrying out trade fairs inside our virtual center. I come to that in a moment. And we have a number of, which I find very interesting, EU Tech programs to support our advocates, our members in their visibility, giving them a higher profile on the international market. So the social media program, also making them more competitive to the digital transformation program. We have our EU Tech Center program, which is basically a landing center in other parts of the world to give here advice and local office to advocates to have easier entrance to these markets, and a number of interesting programs which are around bringing again stakeholders together. One very important one, last but not least, we will come to that later at the very end of this webinar, is a climate action partnership, because out of this we create also little value, well, I hope even better value for our speakers here. As you see, it's not only one alliance, smart cities we are speaking about. No, it's 14, 16 in total. We are also installing a new one very coming up soon, which will address the agri sector, the food and fishery sector in one element. So you see, we have a regional dimension to bring stakeholders together. We have an impact dimension, and we have the tech dimension. So to work very specifically with technology support on the SDGs. As such, while we have daily webinars through each of these alliances, we also have on a regular basis through each of these alliances at least once an expo per year. So one is already upcoming soon by the end of June, which will address the Latin American market. There are others around China, but also others which are more global, because they will address very specific IT and technology items, like the Future Technology Global Summit and coming up in October. Another one then on investment awards in November. If you are interested in such a partnership to create a big event, we can mobilize 200, 300 companies having a booth here to matchmake. We have 1,000 participants. This is all what we do for you. If you are interested in us organizing such an event on a specific topic of interest for you, please reach out to me, because then we can form a strategic partnership and we will do a very meaningful, impactful event for you. Yeah, in total, you see also a few numbers, because every alliance does its webinars, and so that totals up to quite a number of, well, plus 200 per year, many thousand registrants, big database, all working in this field. So it's a big community which we have developed over the past years. So wherever you would like to profile further, here we have the different alliances to give you the visibility to the right and specific stakeholders. As such, while we are today meeting still in the technology or forum, so in the virtual center, we are transitioning step by step into the tech forum. So the tech forum basically is a meeting place for webinars, but also for expos, exhibitions, summits, and awards, where there is on the one hand the speakers corner, there's a networking area, the matchmaking area, and also the exhibition area, so where any participant can bilaterally address and communicate with each other without making us a turntable, but we are providing the platform for you to make use of such a networking possibility. Yeah, as such, with this, I would like to close from my side. As said, my role here is Director Partnership, Institutional Cooperation Status. Here it's Relations in total, but that basically is the same. So I'm very much looking forward to today's webinar. Thank you again for involving me here, Ned, and dear speakers. I would share a bit of more information in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me, and please have a very, very good meeting. Ned, back to you.
Thank you, Markus, for such a great EU Tech Chamber presentation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today in our digital event that we are very confident it will be very interesting for all of you to have better understanding of such a great topic, such as the future of the smart cities. It's a pleasure and honor to introduce you our panelists today. So Sandra Baer is CEO of Personal Cities. Sandra is champion of creative collaboration between public and private sectors. She leads Personal Cities, a smart city company focused on city identity, placemaking, social inclusion and equity, climate action, and acceleration of digital technology investment to support innovation and entrepreneurship. She has advised cities in US, Europe, India, Middle East, and consulted cities and its City Beats and Urban Leap. She has served as a board of professional and civic organization and held marketing leadership roles in AT&T, Speechworks, Discovery Channel, Next Sprint, Reach Global, Smart City Council, and many more. In December 2019, Ms. Baer and her colleague, Dr. Lawrence Jones, released a white paper, Rethinking, Reimagining, Redesigning Global Urbanization, the hard questions for urban stakeholders. Sandra is currently brand ambassador for Smart City World and the special advisor to Saving the City, Remaking the American Metropolis. She has also served as a global advisory board of leading cities and serves as a judge and mentor at ACCILI competition. Ms. Baer is a respected speaker and moderator and has spoken at smart cities, energy infrastructure, climate technology, and many digital conferences worldwide. She holds BA and MBA degree in Global Advanced Management certification from Georgetown University. She lived and worked across Europe and currently resides in Washington, D.C. Next, Joel Meyers is IT engineer, entrepreneur, and leading international technologies, specializing in creation and development of innovation technology solutions in cultural heritage, tourism, and smart cities, working internationally with state and local governments such as Italy, UK, USA, and Mexico. Universities including Harvard, UCLA, University of Virginia, Politecnico di Milano, Universidad de Guadalajara, and industry including partnership with the Google. His company, Who's Around Corp from the United States, own and manage a digital platform called IOP, or Internet of People, that provides socioeconomic recovery for cities through the microcurrency called HOSIS TM. It has been successfully piloted by Mexican state government of Jalisco to the 8.2 million people living and working there, and 1,000 of small business to support local economy during the post-COVID-19 and resimulate the growth. The next municipality to launch the platform will be in New York City. Joel is a chair of IEEE IoT initiative for smart cities and focusing on his working group on redefinition of the digital transformation for urban environments from truly people-centric focal points. Throughout his leadership in IEEE IoT Global City Alliances, he has developed a close ongoing collaboration network between tech industry and smart city, worldwide and regional scale, in order to work in understanding urban needs and priorities, and sharing and developing projects, results, best practices to support interoperability. The work carried out by Joel Mayers has been published in international newspaper journals like BBC, New York Times, Hong Times, Hindu Times, Wired, and Forbes magazine. And last but not least, Pedro Pires is entrepreneur, advisor, investor, and martial art and self-defense instructor, found and managing partner of Loyal Ecosystem, a future lead advisor, decentralized company that help innovation organization to soft land or expand in Europe. Pedro is industry agnostic and love to swing between a helicopter view and deep dive, zooming out and zooming in. Future thinker, visual solution finder, and about conductive learner. So I would like to remind you, this was basically the introduction of our panelists. I would like to remind you that you are able to submit your question through your chat to your chat section. Now I will take a presenter role. And basically, I will help Sandra to go through. I hope you see my presentation. And if you see only a small, please go to upper right-hand corner, and you will be able to see a full screen of the presentation. Now, Sandra, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Ned, and thank you, Marcus. This is so great to be a part of this panel discussion, and I think whenever I get invited to speak about the future, it's always inspirational. Not only that I learn a lot, but also that I hear a lot from members of talk a lot. So this presentation is pretty short, but it's I hope sets the stage for what I think is really the foundation for what's need to do. No, it's 3:15 in the morning here, so I hope that I am clear and awake at this presentation. My business colleague, Lawrence Jones, and I wrote a paper on global urbanization in 2019. And we wrote that paper because I think we're about the need for cities to think that were occurring in cities around the world. And then COVID hit. So we released the paper in 2019. And in 2020, you know, our world was upended. We have different reasons for cities to be positive and optimistic, really. The next slide, Ned. This call, I hope, knows this statistic. By the year 2015, the world's population will be about 10 billion. Currently, it's around 7. But 8.5 billion of those people will probably is moderated a bit by what's going on in our world as we move through COVID. I don't ever use the term post-COVID. I think we're going to live in a COVID world and figure out where the opportunities for many reasons are moving to cities, and that's why I think we have an opportunity to, to really rethink, reimagine, reinvent how cities operate and how they can. I know it's coming. There you go. So, it's upended, and we kept seeing new crises sort of descend on our planet, and certainly in our cities, from the global pandemic, political divisiveness, to the climate crisis, and today, of course, the war in Ukraine. I mean, all of these facts, all of these events in our world have affected daily life, and certainly, I think, our ability to trust one another, institutions, that we would trust nature, that we would figure out how to trust each other. I mean, I think what we saw, in our world, certainly affected by social media and this whole era of misinformation, disinformation. So when we identified this trust deficit, it really affected our ability to sort of to change people's trustworthiness. Next slide, please. Right there. Good. Perfect. Thank you, Ned. So the idea was that if this trust deficit was left unaddressed, it would erode, our big coalitions of people that could figure out new solutions to old problems. But I'm certain that rebuilding trust is the key to all of us feeling safer. We can, create more technology, new ways of approaching city life. So my thought here for going forward is just share in how to make more trustworthy. I feel like people talk around this idea all of the time. They continue to just say, well, yeah, we ought to do this, or yeah, we got to figure out how to with more people, how we can sort of still have civil conversations, still have still have an environment where you can have different opinions. So one of the things that Dr. Jones and I did was create a process called question storming. Question storming is unique questions. For example, how can we rebuild trust in a broken world? And then rather than jumping to an answer or figuring out, oh yeah, I know what to do with that, or oh gosh, we can't do it. Gather a group of 12 to 15 people and you just ask questions. You don't immediately jump to solutions. Obviously, the idea of rebuilding trust in a world is, Ken said it best. He said that for every difficult question, for every difficult problem, there is an answer that is clear and simple and wrong. So the idea being that if you keep asking questions, understand the problem differently. And most importantly, that you see it through the lens of other people. And you take time and space to really do this analysis of the problem and maybe what I wanted to do then is simply give you some ideas about what actions can we take to rebuild trust. So let's see. So I won't go through all of these for you. I hope that you take the time to read each one and sort of think about it, how it could work in your work, in your city, in your community, managing the role of fear. I think that a lot of what's happening in our world today is based on fearfulness and an uncertainty about the future, which of course acknowledging that and understanding that often people are critical or have extremist views because they're fearful. I think that's a really big help to helping us, have conversations about this. The may not be right, and that even if you are right, it may not help you get to a trusting relationship. Is also really important. I think in my work with cities over there, we may not talk to the Department of Public Works, and this silo behavior, whether it's within a city or with an organization, within a project, and to communicating about that. The idea that we start with small steps is really important in my opinion. You can't solve these big problems, chip away at these problems and come up with new solutions, maybe solutions that have never been thought of before. Finally, this idea about being prepared to make sacrifices. Probably about what you believe in, what your values are, what characteristics guide your life, and that's often a good thing. But in terms of building consensus, we need to figure out what is the best way to build consensus. So these are just some of the actions that we recommend people take. If you're interested in questions, Storm, I'm happy to do as it makes you, as I say, see an issue through the lens of other people and really appreciate and begin to understand where they're coming from. And sort of build a bridge if you can. So I guess this idea, it's really the future cities, but even how are the people on our planet going to develop trust with each other so that we can move forward? One of the things that we recommend in the paper we write, which is actually going to be this, and we recommend that people become trust ambassadors. So if you can model trustworthiness in your own work, in your city, in your family, I think that's sort of the very to become a trust ambassador means that you are a model of trustworthiness and that people can count on your word and your ability to say what you mean and mean what you say. Information on it. But I'd love, if anyone is submitting questions or, any of the panelists, I'd love to just continue the conversation about links and I guess moving forward, Stephen Covey says that trust is the glue of society, the glue of civilization. So hopefully we can all be more trustworthy in our own lives and in our cities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to deep dive into our discussion. So, Joel, first question for you. Why are the standards important in digital transformation of the city?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, firstly, for this invitation, for you, Tech, for Ned, for Marcus, and everyone out there listening. It's always a pleasure to be able to speak to anyone that is interested in the present and future of what's going on in our lives. And there's nothing more important than cities, as Sandra, you were saying. I remember when I was at university, it was a while back, and we were being told as technologists that it wouldn't be a problem to actually have to work in cities because we would all be working in the country and doing work from outside of cities. So cities would actually have an easier life. Instead, the opposite is happening, and we still have these floods of people moving towards cities. Before I sort of get on to standards, I just wanted to touch on some of Sandra's points because it's really at the core of everything that we are. Because although many of us are technologists, and if not technologists, we deal with technology. Technology is just a facilitator. It should be facilitating improved quality of life and respect for our environment and for fauna and flora as well, not just human beings. And what we found, the discussion of trust really is the basis of probably the greatest issue that humankind is facing, among many other issues, for example, such as pandemics. But the issue of connectivity. In cities, we find ourselves isolated. And one of the greatest illnesses of today's world, within cities especially, is isolation, anxiety, depression. These are huge issues that very often are not talked about enough, but actually reduce the age in which we live to. It's been proven in various scientific studies. And on a par with issues of heart disease, cancer, is how we live our lives in these cities. And one of the big problems is that our cities have changed enormously. If you look back at the 50s and the 60s, which for some people is way before you were born, but people like Jane Jacobs, an urban activist, who wrote an amazing book that I very much suggest to anyone that is interested in the development of how cities have moved along, which is The Death and Life of Great American Cities. She studied that when cities were small neighborhoods with low-rise buildings and people were gathering around corner shops, cities were completely different. They were connected. People knew each other. People were able to also have a more secure life because you knew, who was really a stranger in your city, in your neighborhood. And cities have changed radically. They're no longer that. And I think under COVID, what most striking thing that happened is that those that live in blocks of apartments, for example, actually found out who their neighbors were. Now this, doesn't maybe touch upon technology. Well, it does. I mean, because you could step back and think, well, connectivity isn't just about global. And I think the problem is that over the last 25 years, since internet became a common thing, we've really focused on becoming a global society. We've looked at the world from the perspective of how wonderful it is that we can connect up with anybody in the world. And social media has, had a revolutionary effect on that. However, it's also been at an enormous sacrifice to local. And we live in local. So supporting local is absolutely critical. And trust and fear, when we talk about strangers, it's most people around us. It's no longer just a few, like in the 1950s and 1960s. And distrust, which also can come from the media as well, is our enemy. So I really, Sandra's point, I think, is really core to living a better quality of life, because a better quality of life isn't just if the train arrives on time, or if you can drive up and down from one side of the city to the other without having traffic. Human beings tend to get used to these type of efficiencies, but quality of life is really about connectivity and social fabric, and supporting community. So it does take me to the question, Ned. I didn't forgotten the question, but within my role in IEEE, so IEEE, it's about 450,000 professional members, as well as those in education and young professionals around the world in about 160 countries. One of our main goals, like other standards development organizations, ISO, ITU, IEC, is to develop standards. Now, when we look at cities, we've got discussions of improving the quality of life. We've just, I talked about connecting people as well. But it's also about being sustainable, because how can we continue to grow as cities if we're not sustainable? And these are huge issues every day for those that run our cities, the municipalities at a local level. And standards, they're the first step. Without standards, what we have, and unfortunately, it's an ongoing battle, are silos-based technologies, silos-based ways of working with issues and challenges that need to be looked at, whether it's power and energy, or telecommunications, or transport. If they're looked at from a single vacuum, where you can build something and you don't have to worry about what effect it has, then you have huge issues afterwards in trying to scale up and look at the way in which the effects of a new solution has on a city. So standards are, in very basic terms, a common language. When you have a common language, it makes things easier. We're speaking today in a common language. Luckily for some, it's their native language, but for many others around the world, it isn't their native language. So why do we speak English? Well, I mean, today we speak English, but maybe in the past we would have spoken French or Russian or Latin. And standards are absolutely critical in cities because they're highly complex on a political level, on a social level, cultural level, over time as well, because cities are continuously changing. And then you have us, human beings. We're extremely complex. And everything is correlated. Okay, so you can't just work in a vacuum and say, okay, we're going to make this change to a city without imagining that it has all these knock-on effects. And the only way to ensure smooth movement through the different knock-on effects is to ensure that everyone is speaking a common language. And it's not, obviously, in this case with technology, necessarily people speaking it, but the systems that we put in place need to be able to speak with each other. The hardware, the software, the data needs to be able to speak across all platforms. And if you're looking at a municipality just on its own, you can look at, for example, a road. And when you need to dig up a road, under the road is all sorts of things. You have power and energy, you have telecommunications, you have water and waste. All of these things live under the road, and they show how intricate a city is. And when taking decisions about simply digging up a road, you have to be able to work across departments. And to be able to work across departments, you need standards. And so how important are standards? Absolutely fundamental. And to be able to work with standards means also to be able to save a lot of money and a lot of time in the future. However, the reality of things is that cities are inundated with lobbies of corporations, especially, that are trying to set the standards of things instead of using necessarily standards that are developed by international bodies. And that makes things a little bit harder, but most certainly it's a key. A common language is a key to running a city.
Joel, thank you, Joel. Thank you so much. So we already have some comments in the chat section. Maybe for anybody of you, if you want to answer it by typing, or we can save it by the end of the webinar. Pedro, welcome again. What can be impact of decentralized organization and remote work in our cities?
Thank you, Ned, for the questions, and I would also like to welcome everyone to the webinar and to thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to hear both Sandra and also Joel's intervention, and I would start to just highlighting two things that that made me think regarding Sandra's and Joel's intervention. Sandra said something like, it's important to, in order to build trust, we need to say what we mean and mean what we say. And this reminded me that trust, the way you build trust is different per culture. Like this phrase I've heard first time when I was 19 or 20. So it's different cultures have different standards and different ways of building trust. And this is very important because when you add technology or smart city standards on top of it, you create the connections with those cultures. So it's very important to be connected with the world, and through education and through citizenship development, you must be external to the world in order to connect this culture points in order to be easy to understand the other and to establish trust. And the second thing, the second order or dimension, it's within. Has Joel focused or told us, the local is very important, and to be connected within a community is key. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges within cities that may be smart, but they are isolated. The isolated individuals, and with age, this tends to increase, become depressed, and they have a big impact in the economy. So it relies again on the same education and citizenship, so that you can build your community nearby. So just highlighted some notes going directly to the question: what can be the impact of the centralized organizations? That some of those came out of the pandemics, but some were here well before, and also the impact of remote work in our cities. So if we look to our cities pre-pandemic and also today, we tend to see the place where you live and the place where you work. And the place where you work tends to be a corporate center, the place where most of the people around you are doing the same you do, working. And people commute daily from their homes to their corporate centers. But with remote work, this tends to decrease. So within remote work, some people prefer to work at home. And with pandemics, this was not a preference. This was something that had to happen. And now it's the time to I would say to most people to understand what is their type of decentralized work. Others work in co-works, or some even do co-living and co-work. And the thing is, working around your community, I would say less than 10 minutes, walking, riding a bike, it's more close to something that Jules said, of good quality of life. And currently, in a world perspective, the infrastructures around our homes are still designed as supports to home living, not to work. So I believe that a key in the future of smart cities, if they can be smart, will be to redesign the infrastructures around our homes in order to have nice places to co-work or to work within some new infrastructure that I think architects and people that have that kind of skills should be also focused. Just a small note. Currently, you see that trend in the increase of co-works that don't have a better word because the word was coined pre-pandemic, but also the redesign of some hotels and big hotel chains that redesign their business model, and they have big areas so that you can go and just work inside the hotel. And that's it for my first intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you. I think, Sandra, next question is in alignment with Pedro's thoughts. So we are talking about new connection to the nature-based living, shape healthier, livable, sustainable environment in the cities, focused on solutions such as green roofs, rain gardens, many other things, green spaces, cleaner air, water, more workable city, a walkable city. What is your thoughts about this?
Thank you. Thank you, Ned. Yeah, I've actually developed a set of 7 elements that I think are remaking the future of smart cities. And nature-based solutions is at the top of my list, because I feel like cities are figuring out their list where they live. They're looking at different ways of approaching big problems. And of course, climate is also at the top of almost everyone's list. How are we going to deal with the water, the heat, sea level rise? All of these things we should be actively working. And so I guess rather than talk around it, I'd like to give examples of cities that are doing things right now. I believe that if we can follow these models, if we can follow these examples, we'll certainly come up with maybe solutions never discovered before. So that's the intent here. A few examples. One is Stuttgart in Germany. They, I think they have something like over 2 million square, and they not only absorb pollution, but of course they also reduce heat. Which is a big factor for cities all over the world. I think Delhi is having a heat crisis right now. And almost every city in which we live, it's hotter for longer periods of time than before. So this idea of doing a nature-based solution, planting trees, building green roofs, managing water systems in new ways. This is the opportunity. One other example I'll give, Ned, very quickly. Guangzhou, China. They have a huge network of greenways. that promote active lifestyles. You know, it's eco-transport, eco-mobility, eco-tourism. I mean, every city that nature-based solution is, I think, ahead of the game, and we should sort of follow those models. I'll be happy to give other examples to anyone who's interested. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. For all panelists, feel free, please, to leave your LinkedIn links in a chat section or emails, so the other people can get in touch with you. Joel, what it's very compelling to me that you are chair of the Smart Cities in IEEE, and what I'm wondering what you can share with us. What are the current projects, and especially the ones that they are maybe connected to the future of the smart cities? So can you please give us a little bit?
Yeah, again, thanks. Before I talk about IEEE and what we get up to, what I'd like to go back on a couple of points that Pedro and Sandra made. So remote working, I absolutely agree with one of the main issues that we're having, not just in remote working, but in so smart working, but in education as well. So over the 2 years of lockdown, I think in most countries around the world, there were issues in being able to have a continuity in working. But I would say probably what was harder hit was education, because a lot of schools were not ready for this transition. So I think we have some lessons learned in the way in which we need to approach a hybrid method of communication. And luckily we have, the technologies on the platform side that have definitely taken a huge leap. And we can see in this webinar itself. But as Pedro was saying, the main issues are, do our households provide that, as a solution? And they're not set up to do that. They're not set up not just from the technology point of view, but they're not set up either as space, because a lot of kids share rooms or share computers or don't have a computer. And it brings and connects with one of the big things that IEEE is trying to do at the moment with organizations that we now work together with in close collaboration, such as United Cities and local governments. So this is probably like I would say the United Nations, if you like, of local authorities. It has over 200,000 local authorities that it works with across the world. And we're working specifically at the moment with the African region, because we tend to look at the great cities of the world when we talk about smart cities. We tend to use, whether it's New York, Oslo, Singapore, and sometimes cities are in political systems where people-centric is a little bit of an issue. It's more government-centric. So decision-making is very different. And expectation and acceptance is very different in these political systems. What we need to do, outside of huge issues like climate change and disaster mitigation, which are becoming worse and worse, what we do need to do is to look at closing the digital divide, because it's absolutely huge. Over half of the world is unconnected at the moment. And that basically means that when you look at populations in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa, not just in there as well, because I can even mention in Italy, there are areas where under COVID, they were not able to work or be educated. But there are countries where the educational system just closed down for 2 years. Uganda is an example of it. And we're working at the moment with UCLG to try to help on the first steps of digital transformation and learn from the other countries that have had the luck to be in systems where you have legacy and you can build upon legacy even with difficulty, to actually develop the first steps, which is, resolving power and energy, because if you don't have power and energy, you can't have internet, you can't have telecommunications. And so those two areas, although water, waste, autonomous vehicles, 5G, 6G, 7G, and these are all very exciting things for us technologists. Our responsibility really is to make sure that we try to move the planet in not at the exact same pace, but at least allow other countries to catch up and other local populations that haven't even started. So one of the things that, as I was saying, to answer your question, Ned, on the IEEE side is that role. We take a very, very strong role. We have a global cities alliance that we built over the last 3 years. We have over 160 plus cities that we work with across the world as focus groups to try to look at the successes that have been had by the lucky ones, the pain, because there's been a lot of pain, and it's an ongoing situation, and to bring industry into that discussion, and bring cities and industry together, not necessarily corporate industry, but very often it's small, medium enterprises that are making the difference, or startups as well. So we have events which we call these action tanks, where we try to bring together city challenges, real city challenges, and those industry players. And the other thing, looking at the future, which is already started over the last few years, is developing what we're trying to do is to recreate a common language for talking about smart cities, an ontology. So we have we're creating the Global Observatory for Urban Intelligence, IEEE, ITU, and the United Nations. Why? Because again, without a common language, we can't really speak to stakeholders and leaders in cities. They don't understand us, and it's not their fault, because we're talking different languages. If you look at a smart city ontology today, it's all about technology. It's all about protocols. It's all about KPIs and measurements. It doesn't talk about budgets or the financial side of the city. It doesn't talk necessarily about urban architecture and looking at discussions like Sandra was saying, and the new language of building residential areas that are actually areas that live 24 hours a day. There's a lot of terminology now in architecture, and it's not connected at all to what is going on in technology, and vice versa. Social behavior. I mean, over the last few years, I would say a decade, we've realized that social behavior is a really important subject to include in the development of what we then put inside our cities. And if we don't have the terminologies as part of the way in which we discuss smart cities, then we're missing a huge element, and we'll never be people-centric. So the Global Observatory for Urban Intelligence, its main focus is to develop this ontology. It's a new ontology. We're working across the sort of international spectrum of experts in different fields, multiple disciplines, to build a new set of terms that are correlated as well, so that we can actually discuss things across disciplines. And then the next stage is digital twins, because once you can model a city not just on its physical assets, so not just on looking at its buildings, for example, or its transportation system, but you can mix in to that model. So, as I said, how do populations function? How do they interact? How does that interact with the engineering, what that you see above the roads and below the roads? Then you can start to build digital models, digital twins that are far more sophisticated than those that we have today. And you can take a lot of decisions without actually having to carry out these technology projects in the cities. You can actually simulate them before you have a go with the cities and affect people's lives. So yeah, there are a few things going on there, but one of the main things is engagement, because as a technology organization, I think finally we're getting the balance of collaboration with cities, industry, as well as academia. So this balance of collaboration, which creates, as Sandra was saying, more trust, but also more understanding of what the opportunities are to use technology better.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. Pedro, do you see any changes? We all know the policies, city policies. The politicians are basically holding a budget for smart cities. Let's in that matter. So, do you see any changes in smart city policy that will happen soon?
Thank you, Ned, for the questions. I'm going also to highlight two topics that Sandra and Joel just shared. I'm very aligned with what Sandra said about nature-based solutions, not only regarding the way you architect your city or you design your city. So I think we need a lot of change regarding that, but also in the way decision makers tend to prepare to do those kinds of decisions. And this leads to me to the highlight I'm going to do regarding Joel's intervention. We already discussed about silo behavior, and we also use the word verticals. So we tend in the last decades, it's a very timely, I would say, trend to focus on the composition. And this decomposition created like a myth between the distinction of our brain and of our body. But the brain is connected to the body, and the way your brain works is related to your body states. So it has a dual impact. So we cannot disconnect our brain from the body. And when technology tends to copy the brain systems, it's forgetting about the connection and the relation with the body. So when you look into this more holistic perspective, you can look to even to smart cities in a different way. And this relates to the question, Ned, you made me, if any changes in policy making will happen soon. I think we need more generalists. Generalists need to team up with specialists in order to balance the team, and this also needs to happen in the policy making teams. I would say that inside policy teams, you need to be innovation open by default and behavior led. And as we know, currently, most of the policy teams tend to mostly be like road blockers to try to understand how innovation is going to happen, and to try to provide some guidance or some rules to innovation. So I think you need to have a multi-skilled team within your policy team. So this means that in smart cities, you don't have only the smart cities experts. You have like I said, a guy that is specialist on behavioral change. And I really think you need to put an entrepreneur inside your team, so that you better understand and connect and have that common language with the external stakeholders and the ecosystem. You need at least to have one entrepreneur, a like mind in your team to help. It can be even the devil's advocate in your team, or like I said, it should be more driven to innovation and to connect with the external stakeholders. So lastly, I would say that not only changing the design of your policy team, but also to reinform your external stakeholder listening processes. This is key in my perspective. And you should do it professionally and using the best standards that you can, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you so much. Sandra, we have new technologies every day, and while we are struggling, I would say, to better learn and understand all these AI, blockchain, cryptocurrency, augmented reality, virtual reality. Now we have a metaverse. You know, it's just exploding and progressing without even asking us, are we ready? So how you what is your thinking? How young tech entrepreneurs shaping tech to address these global challenges?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this question, Ned. It's near and dear to my heart. And I think several people on the call have already, the metaverse is their biggest worry for the future of smart cities. And the question is, what the heck is the metaverse? But anyway, before I answer that question, Ned, I do want to speak to two things. One is that Pedro said, the smart city experts or the city leaders, and I have been preaching that song for 20 years. It's an ecosystem of players. That's who we need to involve. It's a new coalition, smart enterprise folks from small and large business, foundations, the entire panoply of people that are in a community need to have a seat at the table. So I'm a big fan of you said, and certainly and one other thing that Joel said that was fascinating to me about standards for, especially, I actually spoke at an IEEE meeting, Joel, several years ago. But it's important, and yet there are too many metrics, and they focus more on effort than on outcome. So I'm a big critic, as you can tell, of sort of saying, wait a minute, what we need to measure, and get focused on what we're measuring. Later today, I'm talking about at an ESG conversation, environment, social, and governance. And I can't get our arms around it. We can't get focused to fix these problems unless we're really cohesive and comprehend and focused on what the change should be. I'm on the global board advisory board of Leading Cities, and they do a contest every year called Acela City, which looks at young entrepreneurs. I think many of this call, coming up with new ways to sort of figure out new ways of using it. And I'll just give you a few examples because I love giving real world examples, and I hope people on the call will follow up. One is a company there named Andrew Cheong, and he's figured out how to use robots to detect wildfires in advance of their starting. They the heat in the forest or that there may be a danger of a wildfire occurring. There are other uses for these robotic cats, but the whole idea of robotics being something that really benefits cities and unnecessarily, if you will. There's another company that I work with called City Beats, based in Barcelona. Ivan Caballero is the CEO there, and City Beats is genius at using artificial intelligence to say, well, I think people are really worried about homelessness in our city. But when they do the analysis, when City Beats does the AI analysis of social media, find out that people are really or public safety. So I feel like this AI it has so many uses. A friend of mine in the artificial intelligence business at NVIDIA says there are 10 levels of artificial intelligence. Fasten our seatbelts and prepare for a future of smart cities that is really so much more in tune with what young entrepreneurs and technologists are thinking about. And I hope that some people on this call will write to you, Ned, or others of us on the panel, and let us know what they're up to. I'd love to write about it for Smart City.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you.
Joel, you mentioned digital twins, and as we know, they exist today. They are all over. I'm wondering what's the impact they have so far. You are muted, Joel.
Sorry. So yeah, they exist today, but they exist. Digital twins exist in so many different levels, you know, they exist today, but they existed even 20 years ago. Actually, they exist even in humankind, because digital twins, apart from the word digital, but we have a tendency as human beings to create copies in order to be able to communicate, and that can be in art, any sort of form of culture, and general communication. What we found is that since the development of 3D modeling for cities themselves, we've sort of taken off, and there are lots of projects. It's quite common now to have projects within cities where either parts of the city, for example, in New York, where they have a digital model, or Shanghai, they use 3D models to develop a city plan where you have the possibility then to interact. Firstly, one of the advantages is you can communicate across various stakeholders within projects for urban design and planning. If you have a visual model to look at and also to interact with. But you can also bring in community stakeholders as well and share visions of what is going to be hopefully a new look or feel, and what sort of effects that will have on your own lives. So from the beginning, I think that any form of digital model that is used in a city, if it's used for communication and understanding the effects of how a city develops, because a city never stays still, it's in continuous change. So to be able to develop a digital model is already a huge advantage. But we're also seeing already digital modeling within buildings. New York City, again, is on the waterfront, is an incredible example of how digital modeling is being used to redesign and revamp, if you like. Sorry, I have to answer the door. I'm very, very sorry. 1 second. So
I hope it's a food delivery.
No, unfortunately not. But they keep insisting. So it's one of the great things about smart working. Yeah. So on a level of how we can look at buildings also in saving energy, understanding also the interactions of buildings and areas that are being developed, not just for living but for working, the services that are provided. So there are a lot of projects out there now that are using that modeling to be able to better design and understand. There's no also there's no standard. There are so much complexity and differentiation between cities, but we've already seen this huge revolution you know, from, as I say, the urban planning, not just in, you know, in buildings, but also in transport, and in understanding also movements of, you know, electrics, water, waste, all the things that run along cities and below cities, and that's also using digital models. But the general outcome, I mean, the idea is to go beyond that, as I was saying a little bit earlier. But to go beyond that, we do have to create a common language. And when you talk about, you know, teams working on improving, you know, cities through digital transformation, you know, Pedro and Sandra were talking about the multidiscipline aspect. It is critical. If you don't have that, it simply won't work. It'll be a great political project for a while, and then it will have to be replaced. It may not even be accepted. I mean, there have been projects, especially on IoT, because of issues of security and privacy, that have been absolutely, you know, been destroyed before they've even started, because communities don't accept them and they weren't part of the discussion to begin with. But digital models, if done correctly, not only they bring enormous value because you save money, but you can potentially simulate a lot more of how a city functions. And as I was saying, bring in not just the physical side, which is already being done, but also the social side, the social interactions of how people function and move around in the city, and how they use services in a far greater way. And we can, you know, I think over the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to see huge changes in the way that digital models, digital twin models, are being used by municipalities to actually help them to take better decisions and do the measuring of things that, as Sandra was saying, you don't need to measure everything. You need to measure what is important to you. So, I mean, if you're in California or Los Angeles or whatever, I mean, one of the things that you should be worried about is if you have water, because it doesn't come locally, it comes from hundreds of kilometers away. So I would be, you know, making sure that that was one of my priorities. But generally speaking, one of the issues is we also have to live in the world that we find as well. We can preach, you know, that everything can change and everything has to change, but we also have to live with the fact that we're human beings, and our social, political, cultural discussions tend to get in the way very often of what we think should be done for the better. And so you have to find, you know, ways through. And generally speaking, when you're speaking to municipalities, the best way is to show the opportunities and cost saving that technology and things like open data can bring. But digital twins is going to have an enormous effect on being able to be sustainable within cities, because it's going to be the best way to actually understand cities, simulate cities and city, you know, solutions, as well as predicting the issues and trying to work out, you know, the best ways to actually tackle them. And that's, as I say, it's going to happen over the next few years. It's very, very exciting.
Thank you so much. There's another question in the chat section. Anybody who wants to answer it, please do so. So, Pedro, we have in near future, what do you think? In what type of city do you think that smart city innovation breakthrough will happen?
Thank you, Ned, for the question. So innovation breakthroughs are one of the key factors that tend to push cities to the future. And I think that I'm going also to repeat the importance of decentralizing organizations and remote work. This can change a lot how public entities and also private entities do their development of the innovation breakthroughs. Currently, most smart city innovations are focused on mega cities or the global cities that are a reference to all of us. And as Joel Meyer said, even the standards, when we discuss standards, we tend to look at those cities. But with the decentralization of work, mid-sized cities and even low-sized cities can be very interesting to be the places where you do your innovation pilots, because you can be much faster. The dimension is smaller, so you can test it faster, and also you have the dimension to understand if that is scalable or not. And this is a thing that can create a lot of benefits, because currently, and I tend to advise some US companies when they enter, especially Europe, regarding innovation in smart cities, they basically tend to go to the big cities and to test there. And obviously, they find a lot of policy related challenges, and that tends to slow down the process. And in some cities that tend to be very collaborative, but in other cities that tend to be very regulation centered. As we all know, sometimes or most of the times the regulations are not prepared to receive the more recent innovations, and there's a lag of time that happens. So in mid-sized cities and small cities, if we help them to have the best regulatory infrastructure to support innovation, and also the decision-making aspects of that, can be a game-changing, I think, in the way we look into our cities. I would add on top of that also that the way work regulations are developed will be key in the future. The decentralization of work creates a big opportunity. A talented person that is currently residing in a small city does not need to relocate to a big city anymore to develop their work. And so this creates a new opportunity for a second or third level of cities that with on-site work were not able to be on top of the game. And work regulations, if they become more harmonized and make remote work within cross boundaries and easier, I think the balance of cities will happen. If work regulations tend to be more protective, this trend or this opportunity of remote work impacting a more balanced state of cities will be more challenging to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you so much. We have another 5 minutes for discussion, 5 to 6 minutes. So let's say we have 6 minutes, and I would like to ask you, each one of you, for 2-minute final comment on what would be your final statement, what would be your recommendation in regards to the future of the smart city. Sandra, ladies first.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You know, I'm strong, and you know, there are positive benefits from everything we're experiencing now. In fact, I talk about COVID. It has inspired us to figure out that we can do things we thought were impossible. We can have online learning. We can do connect with people. So I think some of this was, as I mentioned, people thought things were impossible, and yet they're certainly possible. So whether it's dealing with technology, which I consider sort of more effectively, whether it's green-based solutions, whether it's understanding the world of work and how it's changing and will constantly be evolving, I believe. Prepare for a future that is certainly uncertain and constantly evolving. One of the issues that comes to mind is this issue of immigration, certainly taking center stage because of the war in immigrants or people coming into their country. How are we preparing for the next pandemic? How are we preparing for the climate crisis, which is at our doorstep? One of the things I just wrote in the chat is take responsibility. Take individual responsibility for what you can do. Form new coalitions. I think the entrepreneurs are making cities better and brighter. I see a brighter future for all of us. Thank you so much, Ned, for inviting me to participate. And thank you, Joel and Pedro. This was really, I learned a lot.
Thank you. Please stay. Don't go away. We have something
I'm not
for
going.
you. So, Joel, your final statement, most prominent key messages, 2 minutes, please.
Well, there's so much been said, you know, cities are. It's a very, very, very difficult. You know, the challenges that municipalities face, but also the challenges that, as we were saying at the beginning, that humankind faces, because in the end, we're living already today, the majority are living in cities. And so I think what's really important, a takeaway from today, but in general, is that we need to share and collaborate as technologists. We need to have a stronger collaboration with those that are involved in taking political decisions, working on budgets that do affect the future. And I think one of the big problems that we've seen when we're talking to municipalities is they just don't really have the time, nor they have the connections with successful stories, some of which we've heard today, out there. So, you know, if you take an African nation, although it's interested in anything that is technology because it understands that, you know, growth is key, and without digital you don't have growth. What is actually most important is to show how certain cities have used technology to improve the quality of life, and those conversations, so between industry and cities, are key. And very often they just don't happen. There are not enough platforms that bring together cities and industry. And we were talking about entrepreneurs, but startups are where a lot of the new technology is coming. And that's why, for example, with IEEE, one of our big events this year is working an event that brings together over 60 cities from the world to talk to startups in Tel Aviv. Not just startups in Tel Aviv, but let's say the startup nation of Tel Aviv as a host for other startups as well that are out there on an international space. But if we can have more open discussion and explain what has been useful, and show how common language and multiple disciplines within those discussions with community stakeholders engaged from the beginning, then we're going to have a lot more success and we're going to become more sustainable. Sustainability is not just the brand. it's it is our future. So we need to to be able to have those discussions across the board.
Thank you so much, Pedro.
So I have one takeaway only to highlight. It's the importance of zooming out and regarding innovation in smart cities, to have a perspective. And I'm going just to share a small story from an American entrepreneur I met last week. He came to Europe following a very cool innovation that he found. His kids' new school has no walls. So it's very important to know if we're increasing the innovation of the walls, okay, or if we're zooming out and developing schools that need no walls, and then we provide the disruptive or the incremental progress of technology and innovation on the proper places. Just to thank Sandra, Ned, and Joel for this lovely discussion, and wishing everyone a nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Looking at the time, we had so much questions. We can talk about, I think, half of the day at least, and about this topic. So thank you so much, Sandra, Pedro, Joel, for your participation. Thank you to our audience. At this stage, I would like to hand over to EU Tech Benedikt Grutz, Vice President of European Senate, who would like to take a chance to hand a little thank you to our panelists.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Ned, for having me. As you said, I'm Benedikt Grutz. I'm Vice President of the European Senate of Economy and Technology. That's the fully name. As you might heard at the beginning of this webinar in the introduction, we are the world's leading, or one of the world's leading tech network, united by this vision technology obliges. That's EU Tech. So we started in Europe in 2015 to unite European enterprises behind this vision. And to help them to reach our three major goals, as you can remember: competitiveness, growth, and sustainability. And the Senate is like an exclusive advisory board of this network. So you have a little introduction to the EU Senate as well. But the most important thing, as you can imagine, climate protection is not only one of the biggest goals of the United Nations, but also of us. And therefore, we are very active. We have an own climate action partnership, and I would like to thank you, dear panelists, on behalf of EU Tech and the Senate, for your contribution for today's event. So we really appreciate that. And here we are. Here are 3 certificates. And herewith, the European Technology Chamber confirms that a tree for Pedro, a tree for Sandra, and a tree for Joel has been planted in Africa by EU Tech Climate Action Partnership. So thank you very much. Again, I think there were a lot of good points to discuss about further. Ned, you're absolutely right. Let's do it a whole day. And now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being our guests today, for our participants. And I think we have nearly 10:30. The honor of the last words belongs to you, Ned. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Just a note, you will get these digital certificates in your inbox in the next 10 minutes. I know Benedikt. So in the name of European Technology Chamber, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. And we are looking forward to see you in our next event in July. And remember, technology obliges. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandra.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, and everyone else. Thank you.
Presents I've ever gotten. Thank you.